You say you want to let go. You tell yourself you're ready to move forward. You repeat the words like a spell, hoping repetition will turn them into truth. And yet, every quiet moment pulls you back. Every pause in the day fills with their name. Every vibration of your phone carries a flicker of hope, even when you know better. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. If you truly wanted to move on, why does your mind still return to them when you're tired? Why does your chest tighten when you remember their voice? Why does absence still feel heavier than the pain they caused? This isn't weakness, but it isn't love either. What you're experiencing is something far more complex and far more revealing. Because most people don't struggle to let go of someone. They struggle to let go of who they became while loving them. And that distinction changes everything. This is not a video about quick healing. It is not about pretending you're fine. It is not about denial, positivity, or motivational cliches. This is about confronting the truth behind attachment, the truth about why certain people stay with us long after they're gone, and why letting go feels less like losing them and more like losing yourself. What you're about to hear may unsettle you. It may challenge the stories you've told yourself. But if you stay, if you listen closely, it may also free you. Because the pain you're carrying is not meaningless. It's a message. Let's begin with something simple, yet rarely questioned. Why does the mind return to what hurts? Why do memories surface uninvited? At night, in silence, in moments that should belong to you? The common explanation is attachment, or love, or habit. But these explanations barely scratch the surface, because the mind does not obsess over people. It obsesses over unresolved meaning. What you replay is not the person themselves. It is the unfinished narrative you never got to complete, the version of them that lived in your imagination, the future that never arrived, the closure you expected but didn't receive. Your mind keeps returning because it believes there is still something to understand, something unfinished, something unresolved. And as long as something remains unresolved, the psyche refuses to rest. This is why distraction rarely works. You can stay busy. You can meet new people. You can fill your days with noise, but silence brings it all back. Because silence removes the mask, and underneath the noise, something is still asking to be seen. Here is a difficult truth most people resist. You don't miss the person as they were. You miss what they symbolized. They became a container for something you lacked, something you longed for, something you believed they could give you: safety, recognition, belonging, meaning, validation, identity. When you met them, something inside you felt awakened, not because they completed you, but because they reflected parts of yourself you hadn't fully owned. They made you feel seen, or at least, they made you feel possible. And when that reflection disappeared, it wasn't just them you lost. You lost access to a version of yourself you didn't know how to hold alone. That is why separation feels so destabilizing, because it removes the mirror. And without the mirror, you're left asking, who am I now? The human mind does something extraordinary and dangerous. It projects. Projection is how we assign our inner world to external objects. It's how we see meaning where there may be none. How we transform people into symbols. When projection happens, the other person stops being who they are. They become who we need them to be. We attach our hopes to them, our unmet needs, our unlived potential. And the more unconscious the projection, the stronger the attachment. Because we're no longer relating to reality. We're relating to an internal image. That image feels powerful, sacred, irreplaceable, which is why logic fails. Friends can tell you the truth. Evidence can pile up. Pain can become unbearable. And still, something inside you clings. Because what you're clinging to isn't reality, it's meaning. At first, projection feels beautiful. You admire them. You feel inspired. You feel alive. But over time, something shifts. You begin to abandon yourself in order to preserve the image. You tolerate what you once wouldn't. You explain away what hurts you. Why? Because the cost of seeing the truth feels greater than the cost of self-betrayal. If the illusion collapses, you must face the void it was covering. So instead, you shrink. You negotiate your boundaries. You silence your instincts. You accept less than you deserve. And slowly, love becomes something else. Not connection, but survival. When someone becomes the source of your sense of self, everything changes. Their attention feels like oxygen. Their absence feels like suffocation. You start measuring your worth through their responses, their messages, their presence. This is not romance. It is dependency disguised as devotion. And the most painful part? You often blame yourself. You think, if I were better, they would stay. If I were calmer, they would choose me. If I were more lovable, this wouldn't hurt. But the truth is harsher and kinder. You were never asking them for love. You were asking them to give you permission to exist. And no human being can carry that weight. Have you noticed how relationships change, but the pain feels familiar? Different faces, different stories, same ending. This is not coincidence. The psyche repeats what it hasn't integrated. Unhealed wounds don't disappear. They seek reenactment, not because you want to suffer, but because part of you is still searching for resolution. So you're drawn to the same emotional dynamics, the same distance, the same inconsistency, the same imbalance. Until you stop asking, why do they treat me this way? And start asking, what inside me keeps choosing this? At some point in your life, you learned a lesson, maybe silently, maybe painfully, that love must be earned. So you adapted. You became agreeable, useful, understanding, low maintenance. You learned how to be what others needed. And in doing so, you survived. But survival is not the same as authenticity. When this mask becomes your identity, relationships stop being mutual. They become performances. You give, you adjust, you disappear. And deep down, something begins to ache. Because you're loved, but not known. External validation is seductive. It feels warm, reassuring, temporary. But it fades quickly. Because no amount of approval can replace self-connection. If you are disconnected from your truth, praise feels hollow. If you abandon yourself, affection feels unstable. That emptiness you feel is not missing them. It's missing you. The parts you silenced, the instincts you ignored, the boundaries you crossed to stay chosen. Anxiety is often misunderstood. We treat it as a malfunction, something to suppress, something to eliminate. But anxiety is communication. It arises when your inner world is divided, when what you feel conflicts with what you allow yourself to feel, when your truth is silenced for the sake of attachment. That tightness in your chest, that restlessness, that hypervigilance, it's not weakness. It's your psyche protesting. It's your inner self refusing to be ignored any longer. The deepest fear is not abandonment, it's exposure. Because without the relationship, without the role, without the mirror, you're forced to confront the question, who am I without them? And if you've been living through someone else, that question feels terrifying. But it's also sacred, because the collapse of illusion is the beginning of truth. There is a part of you were taught to hide: anger, need, desire, independence, vulnerability. You learned these parts were dangerous, unacceptable, too much, so you buried them. But buried parts don't disappear. They shape your choices from the dark. They attract situations that force them to the surface. That is why patterns repeat, not to punish you, but to wake you up. Intensity is not intimacy. Chaos is not chemistry. What feels magnetic is often familiarity. Your nervous system recognizes what it knows, even if it hurts. Healing requires something unfamiliar: stillness, consistency, mutuality. And that can feel boring when chaos was mistaken for love. Freedom does not begin with forgetting. It begins with integration, with reclaiming what you projected, with holding yourself instead of outsourcing identity. It begins when you stop asking, "How do I make them love me?" and start asking, "How do I return to myself?" Letting go is not loss. It is allegiance to your truth, to your wholeness, to the parts of you that were abandoned. When you choose yourself, you don't become alone. You become intact. When you begin to loosen your grip, something unexpected happens. It doesn't feel like relief at first. It feels like grief. Not just grief for the person, but grief for the version of yourself that existed through them. The self that hoped, the self that waited, the self that believed endurance was proof of love. Healing asks you to mourn what never truly was, and that can hurt more than losing what actually existed, because illusions are powerful. They are built from hope, imagination, and longing. Letting go of them feels like dismantling a future you already lived in your mind. This is why many people retreat at this stage. They mistake grief for failure. They think pain means they're going backward. But grief is not regression. Grief is integration. It is the psyche recalibrating after years of distortion. It is the nervous system learning that it no longer needs to stay on alert. It is the heart relearning how to exist without bracing for disappointment. When you feel sadness without urgency, when you remember without spiraling, when longing softens into quiet understanding, that is not weakness. That is healing taking root. And it is uncomfortable precisely because it is unfamiliar. You are no longer chasing, no longer bargaining, no longer proving your worth through endurance. You are standing still. And for a mind conditioned to survive through attachment, stillness feels like danger. But stillness is where truth emerges. It is where you begin to notice your own voice again, your own preferences, your own limits, your own rhythm. At first, this can feel empty, but emptiness is not absence. It is space. Space that was once occupied by anxiety, by anticipation, by emotional labor. And slowly, that space becomes breathable. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to choose instead of cling. You begin to feel grounded without needing someone else to anchor you. This is when a subtle shift occurs. You stop asking, "Why did they leave?" and start asking, "Why did I stay?" Not with shame, but with curiosity. And curiosity is the beginning of wisdom. Because when you understand why you stayed, you understand what you were protecting. And when you understand what you were protecting, you learn how to protect it yourself. This is the quiet rebirth no one talks about. Not dramatic, not euphoric, but deeply stabilizing. A return to yourself that doesn't demand an audience. And once this process begins, something profound becomes clear. You were never broken. You were adapting. And now, you are finally allowed to stop. So I'll leave you with this. What if the pain you're experiencing isn't proof that you lost something? What if it's proof that something within you is ready to be reclaimed? Because the end of attachment is not emptiness. It is space. And in that space, you finally get to meet yourself. Without mirrors, without masks, without fear. And that meeting changes everything.